Okay, where do we start?
All right. So, well, basically the backstory is we were at a coffee shop this morning, and we started talking about what does it mean to be attractive as a man, right?
Yeah.
And yes,
I have some theories about how especially men tend to get this wrong. So we tend to, and I think this comes from Alison Armstrong, who has a bunch of programs about like the differences between men and women, which are very much worth listening to. And I think she talked about this, where the basic mistake that we tend to make when it comes to dating is like men tend to assume that women are basically like men with breasts.
yeah,
and vice versa, right?
Yeah.
And it's not like that. And her work is all about, listen, the experience of being male versus female is very different, and she tries to bridge that gap a little bit. And so when it comes to attraction, men are very visual when it comes to attractiveness. And I think we make that mistake that we assume that women are the same. And so we tend to worry too much about things like, oh, what's my physique like?
Yeah.
Do I have big enough muscles? Being fashionable, wearing accessories, all this kind of stuff, which can contribute to attractiveness, but it's not nearly as important as you think it is. And so one thing, I have a set of theories about this that I think can help. The way I think of it is try to recalibrate how you think about this, right? Because if you have a wrong model about how attraction works, then you can constantly be running in the wrong direction, which I think a lot of men are doing. So my thinking about this comes from the Anthropological View, and a great source, one of the greatest books on this that I've read is The Evolution of Desire by David M. Buss, which basically is a book about human mating behavior, written very much like you'd write a book about the mating behavior of fruit flies or the mating behavior of the mountain gorilla or whatever, right? Where it's kind of a very objective view. This is what they seem to be doing, you know?
Like a documentary style, National Geographic, okay.
Exactly. And I think that's brilliant, because usually when it comes to this topic, we are too close to it. You know, we're so tied up in our cultural values and what we think should be right and so on that we can't see this very clearly. But if you just say, let's study the human animal, how do they mate? And how do they mate, you know, over time in different areas, different cultures and so on? It reveals a perspective that I think is very valuable.
All right.
So,
well, you know, some of the things I've heard is attraction is same across all cultures, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the whatever non-physical cues or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And just on Alison Armstrong in The Amazing Development of Men, right? Mm-hmm. One of the things that really stood out to me is when she emphasized, she starts with guys, right? She's like, for men, it's like we spend so much time on our opinions and developing like strong opinions. Mm-hmm. So for us, like we will defend those with our lives, right? Mm-hmm. And then she switches to women and she's like, for women, that's feelings. And I was like, oh,
yeah.
That's why I should pay attention to them.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, it's great. That's a really good listen, I think, for anyone.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
So, okay, and then so that's basically The Amazing Development of Men is her take on, on men. And then, what is it? Something feminine? I can't remember what the female one is called.
Yeah, I'll look it up. I have it in my audiobooks.
But basically, there's also an equivalent of like explaining, the female perspective. And I think both men and women should probably listen to both. I think it's very, very eye-opening. But yeah, so when it comes to, like we said, the topic was like what makes men attractive. And actually, we started talking about like gym and exercise and whatnot, right? Yeah. Where like this is one of the things most guys who go to the gym. At least what drives most people to start exercising initially is you want to look better.
Yeah.
And obviously, as a guy, you kind of hope that you'll go to the gym and then become very, very muscular, right? You want to have that insane physique that you keep seeing, which is also, that's part of the problem, right? We're being shown all this imagery of absolutely stacked dudes. And this has changed, I mean, this is one of the crazy things, right? If you look at James Bond, for example, Sean Connery, when Sean Connery was playing James Bond, he basically had a dad bod pretty much, right? It's like he wasn't like overweight or anything, but he wasn't muscle bound.
He was not Hemsworth or
exactly.
Yeah.
And now you see, obviously lots of male celebrity actors are playing these superheroes. They're absolutely massive, right?
Yeah.
But also even James Bond, right? You have James Bond. When Daniel Craig came along, this guy is yoked. I mean, he's huge, right? But interestingly, in the cultural context, by the time he took over, his physique was just like, male Hollywood actor physique.
Right.
So basically, they're all that size
norm,
at this
yeah.
point. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there, I think men have experienced something that women have probably experienced for much longer, which is like we're being shoved. we're
ridiculous beauty standards.
Yeah, we're having ridiculous beauty standards shoved our way. But I think that, and be that as it may, I think that the biggest thing to understand is that, listen, for most of us, we are never going to look like that.
Yeah.
And because there's a huge genetic component here. Now, I have firsthand experience from this because I've trained with a lot of people. I've trained with a lot of people in martial arts, and I've also trained with a lot of people in the gym and stuff. So I have a lot of firsthand experience with basically genetic differences and how that affects the physicality of someone. I have trained, I remember one of the most extreme examples of, physical specimen, and he did end up training on an Olympic team as well. So one of the guys I trained with, who was like, I think 17 or 18 at the time or something. And this guy was already massive, right? He was so muscular and so strong. And, and I was like 4 or 5 years older than him, but he was way stronger than me. But also this guy was broke as hell, okay? He was definitely not on steroids. Right. He couldn't afford them.
Couldn't afford them, yeah.
He also didn't go to a gym, by the way. Like this guy literally at some point when he was 16 or something, he was like, I want to get in shape, started doing push-ups and burpees. And next thing you know, he's massive, right?
Wow.
So this guy's genetics, and like I said, he ended up training with an Olympic team. This is an example of someone whose genetics are just like, here's an athlete, right? This guy's muscular and athletic potential is so far beyond mine. And I've seen this in various examples, right? I've seen people who are seemingly, they look like some normal guy, but they're incredibly strong. Right? Yeah. I have literally trained side by side with people where I'm stronger than that guy and he looks twice my size, right? Things like that. So I've seen this difference. So I just know that. So when I see a guy who's super muscular, I know that this isn't just a case of, he works out more than me.
Yeah.
I know that he maybe works out half as much as me, but he's just got different genetics.
The genetic makeup, yeah.
Yeah.
And like another thing you remind me of was like the guys who are like super lanky, but they take their shirt off, they're ridiculously ripped, like Bruce Lee type guys, right? Yeah. And
a lot of that is just down to your genetics. So if you don't take steroids, then you are never going to look like most of these people that you see in the media. And by the way, even if you do take steroids, you'll probably never look like that. Right? Because these guys have great genes and they're roiding.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, there's a very apt time to talk about this because I keep seeing videos about, like on fitness YouTube channels, right? About guys who are like 16, 17 years old and starting to take steroids already. Yeah. It's like, what the fuck are you doing with your life?
Yeah, that's crazy, right? Yeah. And that shows you the pressure, right?
Yeah. Sorry to sound judgmental, but the reason I'm saying this is because from a health point of view, not saying like, don't do it or whatever, but from strictly a health point of view,
Yeah, and it's one of those things like, I also think, look, you can make your own decisions about whether you want to take steroids or not, but it probably is better to mature a little bit before you make that decision, right?
Let your body actually develop,
Yeah. And also your mind, like, can you actually make a good decision about whether you should do this when you're 16, right? I don't know. Most people don't make the best decisions when they're 16.
Exactly.
But anyway, so the reason I'm saying all this is because I think that's one of the problems, right? If you have a false expectation and you go to the gym to get in shape and you think if I work hard enough, if I follow the right program or whatever, I'm going to end up looking like Chris Hemsworth. Well, most likely you're not.
Yeah.
Okay. Most likely you're not. And if you set yourself the standard, I have to look like this in order to be attractive, and until I look like that, I'm not good enough, I'm not working hard enough, I'm not worthy, well, you've just put yourself in a trap that you're never getting out of, right?
Yeah.
So
you're actually perpetuating the self-hatred, the thing you're trying to run away from in the first place. Yeah.
So, okay. So, but what's the alternative? What I think, so that's where men go wrong, right? Because we're so physical. We think so much about physical appearance when it comes to attractiveness. We think it must be the same the other way around. So I have to be maximally physically attractive. And there also comes, the whole obsession with your jawline and God knows what, right? Hair loss and so on. That I think men generally worry too much about.
Yeah, way too much, yeah.
And so what's the alternative? What do I suggest? I think that it's helpful to realize that what you look like in a picture with your shirt off is only a tiny sliver of what makes you attractive, okay? Because what it really comes down to, so what are we signaling? If you're big and strong and muscular, what are you signaling? Well, what's attractive about that is that it implies power, okay? And it implies, to some extent, it implies like health, discipline, and capability, okay? And for men, this is how I invite you to think about attractiveness. Attractiveness is all about capability, okay? What are you capable of? Because an attractive man is basically a high-status man. And in whatever culture we're in, right, in whatever time you find yourself in, there's always a competition for status among humans, among Homo sapiens, right? So, and the high-status man is generally the one who commands the most resources, who has the most power in whatever ways. Now, in different cultures, that looks very different, right? In some culture, that might be the guy who's the best hunter and brings home the most meat or whatever, right?
Right.
And in some other culture, it's the guy who has CEO in his LinkedIn profile, right? Whatever, right? But it's always about high status, power, capability. And capability is the model that I recommend using for thinking about how do I make myself more attractive as a man? How do I increase my capability? And how do I demonstrate capability? And let's just stay with the physical for a moment.
Sure.
So if you have big muscles, that shows that you are strong, so you can physically overpower another man.
Yeah.
That is a status
and you
thing.
can protect and, feel safe around you. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. You can provide safety and protection. But also right away, I think you can notice, this is actually not that relevant anymore, right? Because if I have big muscles, you have a gun, well.
It's over, yeah.
Yeah. So... But it also shows like you're capable, right? You're capable of training hard with discipline, that kind of thing. That's also capability. So it shows that you have your shit together a little bit, maybe. Right. And this is one of the things, right? This is also one of the things that makes like an out of shape, skinny, fat body unattractive. It's not so much the shape of the body, but what it says about you.
Yeah.
What it says about how do you live your life? How much are you in control of your habits and so on? Well, not very much.
Okay, that's actually really important from the visual standpoint you were talking about, right? Like, why are guys visual? The things we find attractive in women actually what signify fertility, right?
Yeah.
She makes for a great partner.
Yeah.
So similarly, applying that same lens on us, like, if I'm like skinny, fat, and out of shape, like, what does it say about me? Like, I don't care about myself. I'm not putting in effort, etc.
Yeah.
So it is, to a certain degree, it can be applied both ways, right?
Yeah, totally. And so. And again, staying with the physical, so what you have to realize as a man is that you have a certain genetic potential. And look, obviously you can change the way you look. You train a lot, you eat well, it's going to change how you look. Yeah. But you're going to look like a fitter, leaner version of you. You're not going to look like Chris Hemsworth. And that's fine, because a fitter, leaner version of you with your body shape, your body type is attractive. And I think we underestimate how attractive that is. But here's the other thing. The way you hold yourself and the way you move demonstrates physical capability. And that is, I think, the most overlooked thing. Because if you have a guy who is just like this muscle-bound bodybuilder, and you stand him next to a guy who's, let's say, a dancer, obviously, the bodybuilder is much more muscular, has a quote-unquote better physique.
Right.
But most women would prefer the dancer. And why is that? The dancer isn't a muscle freak, right?
Yeah.
But what is so attractive about the dancer? Well, he carries himself a certain way. He moves competently, confidently. The way he moves is demonstrating more capability than probably the way the bodybuilder moves. And this is why I think it's important or useful for your attractiveness as a man to not just go to the gym and lift weights, but to do something else, to practice martial arts, dancing, climbing, whatever, right? especially full body stuff, and really, the more you become embodied, like the more you live inside your body, the more comfortable and confident you are in moving your body, the more attractive you will appear just in default mode. Just, people see you walk around and it's like, there's something about this
guy, yeah. You walk with an aura and a presence, yeah.
Yeah. And again, so that's a huge difference maker there, is just how much capability are you demonstrating, not just when you're posing, right?
Yeah. And just for the business bros out there,
yeah,
it's like knowing your target market as well, right?
Yeah.
Like women are so naturally in tune with their body and being present to the moment. I'm almost jealous of them because they can snap into it like that, right?
Many of them, yeah.
Yeah. So the dancer is kind of signifying he gets it, right? And women are like, oh, like me.
Yeah.
So therefore, attraction.
Yeah. So, and we can also take that same idea further, where it's because it's the same for like dressing fashionably, wearing expensive watches, driving expensive cars, whatever, all this other stuff that men do. It's the same kind of thing where the thing that makes it attractive is if I have a very expensive car, I'm signaling that I'm capable of making enough money to afford this car.
Right.
That's what it comes down to.
Of course, yeah.
And it only works, or this is where it can also backfire, because if I'm spending my last cent on status symbols, so that I'm actually broke, right, and I'm leasing the car and I can barely afford it and so on, then I'm simply sending a false signal, and she'll figure it out.
Yeah, pretty soon, yeah.
Because there's the capability that I'm signaling isn't actually there, right?
Right.
So
fake gurus.
Yeah, totally, yeah. And who are the customers of these fake gurus flashing the watches and so on? They're almost all men, right?
Always, yeah.
So think about, and I think this is where men are incredibly lucky. Okay, in the dating game, men are super fortunate because there's so much we can do to become more capable. One of the things that if you ask women what makes a man attractive, one of the things that most of them agree on, one of the first answers you often get is confidence.
Oh, yeah.
And confidence is a signifier of that, right? Again, it's like, and you can try to fake it, you can try to pretend to be confident, right?
Yeah.
And that will probably work to some degree, but you'll always get found out if there's no capability behind it.
Yeah.
But you can become a highly attractive man if you work on your capability at things. So work on your physical capability, but also as a man, essentially, you have to be out in the world and do something and get good at something, right?
Right.
I've mentioned this before, the idea of a skill crucible. I think especially for young men, you have to have something that you're kind of obsessed with, that you get good at, and that's your skill crucible. You throw yourself into this thing and you learn the process of skill development. You learn the process of overcoming your limitations. You learn the process of doing the hard thing. And even if it doesn't really matter what that is,
right.
It can be skateboarding, right, which is not a particularly useful life skill, but you can develop that mindset and you can learn how to master difficult skills and so on, doing something like that. And that carries over later to other things. And so if you are pursuing something like skateboarding and you really give yourself to it, you get really good at it, then you feel good about yourself because one of your values is I want to be a great skateboarder, and that's what you're doing. So you
right.
feel more confident. And that's real confidence. That's not watching alpha male YouTube videos about how to appear confident, right?
Right.
That's real confidence. And that will be attractive. And basically, if she responds to that signal of attractiveness, you're confident because you're a good skateboarder, to some extent, she's right. Because what you've demonstrated is the ability to take a hard skill and master it. And so if you decide to build a great career for yourself, you can probably do it. The chances of you being able
right.
to do that are higher.
Potential,
right?
yeah. Potential in a man. It's so true.
Yeah.
That's one of the qualities I found. Okay, I was going to generalize, but I'll just do it. I find all women want an ambitious guy, right? None of them want someone who's just oh, my passion is to sit on the couch and eat Doritos, right?
I'm really good at it.
Yeah. But the thing you were mentioning about the skateboarding thing, I've learned it from the lens of passion. If you're passionate about something and when you start talking about it, right? I've always seen it they want to see what you dream about, right? And then when you paint that vision, like, you know, you don't go around telling everyone your passions, but when you start painting it for someone and she's like, wow, she's in awe.
Yeah.
So that builds the attraction as well. And just on the confidence thing, one more thing, this is anecdotal experience, so I'm not sure how true it is, but when I used to fake confidence, I'm not going to go too deep in this, but like in the pickup community, there's this idea of shit tests, right? Like the women start testing, oh, is this guy actually as cool as he's pretending to be, right?
Yeah.
And that used to happen so much. I'm like, oh my God, these girls are so mean. Like, why? Right? And then that switched at some point to genuine confidence, and I never get anyone doubting me, whether it's like a girl, guy, whoever. They just, people have an innate sense of ability to determine whether or not you're bullshitting them.
Yeah.
So when you're truly who you are, that also amplifies.
Like deep confidence is different,
Yeah.
and it's interesting that if you're faking it, she starts prodding you because she's like, something's off, right?
Yeah, something's wrong with this guy.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
and
that's
as she should be, right? Because you never know.
Yeah. And again, from a like anthropological evolutionary perspective, it makes sense that if you're trying to pick a good mate, and generally the male is in the role of pursuing and the female is in the role of filtering, like it makes sense that she has like an innate ability to be like, oh, I have to, I have to be able to tell the guy who's pretending from the guy who's real. So it kind of makes sense that a lot of women do this without even thinking about it, right? It's kind of, we've evolved, we've come this far because, they've been doing it for so long, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. They kind of have had to develop that as an evolutionary advantage, right? Because otherwise, like why does why Darwinism, for example, survival of the fittest and the strongest survive, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If they couldn't discern that, that would not be true.
It wouldn't be good for the individual's mating success, right?
Yeah.
But again, to come back to this idea that as men, we're super lucky because we can develop these things.
Yeah.
And you can be a physically pretty unattractive man and be a very attractive man. And for women, that's way harder, right? So for women, if you're, again, like just genetically, right, if you're an unattractive woman, you will have a much harder time to compensate for that with other qualities. Whereas for men, it's kind of
almost arbitrary.
It's kind of easy.
Yeah.
It's like you can be attractive in so many other ways. Also, another way, and I've only recently realized this, but I think another way in which men are really fortunate in the dating game. And it feels bad initially because as a man, you will have this experience that basically for most young men, right, apart from a lucky few who are, or maybe unlucky, who knows, few who are very, very physically attractive. When you're young and you start developing interest in girls, you will experience a lot of rejection generally, right? You'll be like, oh, and all the girls are into the one popular guy in class, and that's not me. And you also have this problem where, it's like you're a 16-year-old kid with pimples all over you and whatnot, and you're attracted to these women who, or maybe older women who are like fully developed women, you're like so attracted to them, and you're the least attractive creature on earth to them, right? So it's
pimples, puberty.
Yeah. So it's like that's really unfortunate. But here's the thing: what we learn as guys, what we learn very early on is that, hey, if you want the girl, you got to do something. You got to get your shit together. You got to get good at something.
Yeah.
You have to do something. In a way, there's this thing that pushes us. It's a primal motivation, right? We're mammals. We want to procreate. We have mating instincts. There's a very strong primal drive, and very early we are taught the lesson: listen, you can't just coast here. You have to earn it in a way.
Right.
So there's this strong primal motivation that essentially ideally pushes us into self-development, into, okay, how do I get in shape? How do I, develop my mind, develop my body, have a good career, etc.
Yeah.
That's the ideal outcome. And ideally, as a man, you would have some older brothers, uncles, father figures around you who can also steer you that way. Who can say, oh, you have some girl trouble, let me help you out, right?
Right.
And who can make sure that you don't go, because obviously, you mentioned the pickup community, right? A lot of people kind of go down a dark path of,
Yeah.
you know, how do I manipulate and cheat and whatever my way to
Yeah.
getting laid, right? Which obviously, you know, which might work, but it doesn't lead to the thing you actually want.
Which is genuine connection.
Yeah, which is genuine connection ultimately, right? So, but yeah, ideally you have this strong drive, this motivation. You learn, I need to get my shit together and I can become a more attractive man. And you do that. And the thing is, ultimately the same is true for women. Because as a woman, you can much more easily coast on your looks when you're young.
Right.
But if you, it's like later on, I think it becomes apparent to women too, that you can't just bring your looks to the table. Because if you're just pretty, and even worse, if you're pretty and you've always been spoiled your whole life because you're pretty, and you haven't had that push to developing yourself, and you maybe have a strong sense of entitlement, well, what's going to happen? Well, you're probably going to find, you know, an attractive rich husband or something or whatever. You'll have your pick from the lot, right? But and maybe that works. Maybe that turns into a good relationship. Maybe not, right? And now, if you're, you know, a 30-year-old divorcee, and now you realize, oh, I'm not getting as much attention from men anymore. And now you learn the lesson that you also need to get your shit together, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not enough to be pretty. That's still true, but it's like we're lucky that we learned that lesson early, you know?
Much early, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, that is like the tragedy with women, for sure. Like, because there's so many stories like these that keep coming out, right? Like, apparently, like, the latest stat was, like, I think 51% of women by 30 are single now, right? And they're just not, I don't know. I have no idea about all this stuff, but I just find it sad when I hear things like that.
Yeah.
You know, because they could have been taught this the whole time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and also, I mean, I think that we have a bit of a crisis because I think, I mean, lots of men of all kinds of ages are single too.
Yeah.
I believe, I read some statistics that like people are generally having less and less sex, right? So it's like young people have, like the current generation of young people is having less sex than any generation before them probably, or at least, you know, as long as we've been collecting this data.
Yeah.
And stuff like that is like, I think we have a bit of a crisis in dating and mating at the moment where, yeah, a lot of single women, but also a lot of single men, a lot of basically unhappy people, also a lot of unhappily coupled people, right? I think things are not going well for the majority of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a tangent, not going to go too long on it, but I recently found out about this thing. There is like a dumb phone revolution happening. And like people like Selena Gomez, she talked about it. She like quit the internet for like 4.5 years.
Wow.
Yeah, and there was another girl, she has a video on YouTube, very good one. I forget her name, sorry. But she talked about how, she's like, I gave up my phone or my smartphone, right? And 6 months later, I'm like, wait, I don't have any anxiety.
Right.
Like she's like, I'm not saying I'm never going to use it again.
Yeah.
But like this general state of like, you know, mental health and blah, blah is a problem.
Yeah.
Maybe this is the thing that's causing it.
I think it has a lot to do with that, right? Where we are, because you're through your phone and through these like addictive attention economy things, so many people are spending so much time scrolling through a feed where they're constantly confronted with things that invite social comparison.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, obviously, most people who have large followings and so on are generally pretty attractive.
Right, yeah.
And it's often, I find that it's like if you pay attention to it, it's often even people where that's not the point, right? It's like, I don't know, someone has, you know, they do tutorials or something, but you'll often find that the person with millions of followers who does tutorials is pretty damn good looking, right?
Attractive one, yeah.
So, and yeah, so we're shown all this imagery that like invites this social comparison. But also, I think, you know, we're seeing more and more of a commodification of dating and mating, right?
Right.
Where because you have this, when you have Tinder, obviously, the Tinder model that ended up winning, because in online dating, originally you had these different competing models. One of them was kind of the Plenty of Fish model, where it's like we try to build a very in-depth profile of people and we try to figure out how to create good matches. But the model that won is, I'll just swipe through these pictures, right? Yeah. Just instant impression, swipe, right?
Easy, effortless, fast.
Yeah, and obviously, and this is also another book recommendation I want to drop here is Don't Trust Your Gut by Seth Stevens-Davidowitz, who writes about all kinds of stuff. Like basically, it's like self-development from a data scientist point of view.
Right.
And he goes through different things, but one of his chapters is also about like dating and mating. And what the data shows is that we are optimizing for all the wrong stuff. So the stuff that leads to the greatest, that makes the biggest difference in success on a Tinder-like dating app is the stuff that has the least correlation with actual like compatibility and long-term happiness in a relationship.
Right.
So we are optimizing for, visual attractiveness, social status on social media, status symbols, visual stuff, right? But what actually predicts long-term happiness in a relationship are, let's see, I think there are 4 factors there. One of them was growth mindedness. Okay, so growth mindset versus fixed mindset. So growth mindedness, then conscientiousness, which is, are you reliable? Are you basically, this is getting your shit together, right? Do you have your shit together? That's conscientiousness. Then there was general content. So people who are happy in a relationship are the kinds of people who are happy in general. Okay.
On their own,
Yeah.
Versus codependent or something.
Yeah. And then the last one is a healthy attachment style, so a secure attachment style. So this is from the attachment styles, we can add avoidant, I don't know what the others are, but healthy or securely attached means that you essentially have trust in a relationship. You have trust that, you feel safe in an attached. And that in a relationship, in a social attachment, that would be something we essentially learn from our childhood, from our parents. And the way I see this, these 4 factors, like most of us are kind of screwed on the last one.
Yeah.
Okay. Because that's just, I don't know how much you can change your attachment style. I don't know that many people who seem to be securely attached. I think most of us are like traumatized in some way or another. Yeah. So it's like, okay, that one's a scratch. But all the other 3 you can do something about, right? So the other 3 things, like you can develop a growth mindset. This has a lot to do with self-development. Like you develop a growth mindset by proving to yourself that you can change, right? That you can learn things, that you can improve, that you can, whether that's, you can learn skills and get better at them, or also you can say, hey, I'm a bit of a pessimist and I can deliberately change the information I consume. I can maybe do some introspective writing. I can do stuff in order to change the way I think, change my mindset about things, right? So growth mindset that's all about personal development. That's totally in your hands. Then being conscientious, same thing. It's like, okay, well, develop good habits, become the kind of person who does what they say they're going to do.
Right. That's
totally in your hands to develop. That's down to your habits, basically. And then the third one, like generally being happy and content, that's also something you can develop, right? This is something that positive psychology has shown very clearly, is that yes, different people might have different set points, right? There might be some genetic component there where, some person is just, it's easier for them to be happier than for this other person.
Right.
But in general, through doing a lot of the practices that have come out of positive psychology, gratitude practices, cultivating your social connections and so on, you can raise your general happiness and contentment level significantly. And also for especially that one, I think, doing things like possibly getting therapy, doing shadow work, doing things like that, can also make a huge difference, because one of the things that makes people miserable is like our emotional baggage, unresolved emotional stuff. And a lot of the time that is solvable. And to come back to what you said before, a lot of people are being made miserable because of the kind of information we consume, because of how we spend our time. And look, if you live in a human body that is built to move, and you spend all of your day in like a hunched over position looking at a screen, consuming junk information, it's like no wonder you're depressed or anxious or whatever, right? But again, that's in your hands. You can change that. It's up to you to change those habits. So, and this is good news across the board. Like this is good news equally for men and women. And also, right, we've been talking like from a hetero perspective the entire time. But for anyone, anywhere who wants to have, who wants to have a better dating and relationship life, the great news is that the things that make you a great partner are mostly in your control. And this is my theory. I don't know if this is true, but this is how I approach it. If I want to have a great relationship, if I want to attract a great partner, I'm going to make sure that I'm a great partner, right?
Yeah.
That's the thing I can control. I can't control if the next person I meet is an amazing person or not. But I can make sure that by the time I meet that amazing person, I'm worthy of them, because I've actually worked on myself. I've got my own shit together, and I hit those three. There's 3 out of 4 that I can control, right?
You just reminded me of a quote from Tony Robbins that changed my life. It's like, in life, you don't get what you want, you get what you are. So if you want better, become better.
Totally, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I highly believe in that. I also think that it's just the kind of stoic approach, right, where you make a distinction between what you can and what you can't control, and you focus on the stuff you can't control. And in fact, look, that brings me back to a lot of the stuff we were talking about before. You know, if you're obsessed with your physique or your hairline or whatever, it's like, listen, can I control this? You know, can I have the genetic muscular potential of Chris Hemsworth or Arnold Schwarzenegger? No. There's no technology in the world that would make me look like this, okay?
Right.
Like, even if I take all the steroids I can get, even if I get under the knife for surgery and stuff like that,
there is still an upper limit.
Never look like this. I cannot control this. And so I don't worry about it, right? My level of concern about the stuff I can't control is 0, right? And this is also why I'm saying, this is really what it comes down to say, listen, consider that you can become a fitter, leaner version of you, and that is good enough. That is what's in your control. And think about how attractive you are if you are a fit, lean version of you who's completely comfortable with what you look like. Versus if you're like a roided up, more muscular version of you who's like, oh my God, I can't go to the beach because my delts aren't popping.
Like needy and insecure.
Yeah.
It's like, do I look good?
Yeah. It's like, that's not attractive, dude. Right? So yeah, I think that's what it comes down to. Like, and the good news here in all this is there's so much you can do to become more attractive, and there's so much you can do to become that amazing partner that sets you up for actually having a good relationship.
Yeah, it's so true. Going back to what you were saying about, you know, being a guy in this regard is relatively easier, right? Because the qualities, like for example, capability, right? That, at least that's the one that stands out the most to me. Like, increasing your capability is so far from just physical. It's who you are as a person, conscientiousness, and the things you were saying. Yeah. So in that regard, we are generally luckier, right? Yeah. But it's not to say that this means, oh, finally, you don't have to work out anymore. No, you still need a functional, moving body that you can be confident and comfortable in, right? Yeah. So don't just ignore it. And I just want to quickly plug, like, if you go back in the Ikario podcast, there's How to Get Your Shit Together series, right? Yeah. It literally starts with physical for a freaking reason. The cascading effects are so practically endless in all areas of your life, right? Yeah, and that's also, you know, exactly, that's also a thing about your physical development and your physical capability, is that it helps with your mental health and other stuff. But also what you were saying, you know, in terms of developing capability, you know, I think as a man, you must develop your capability in more ways than one. Like, you must develop your capability in order to become attractive and so on. And since most of us have a strong drive to do that anyway, well, you might as well. But also, men are kind of built for that, you know? Like, you probably have an innate drive to build your capability. That's a very masculine thing. And it depends on, like, how well connected you are to this. But I think most people, or most men, will find that you have this kind of ambition drive in you. And it's possible that through life experiences, maybe that has been kind of crushed, right? Maybe your confidence has been crushed or something. But you'll find that, you know, and even a lot of men who are like quote unquote losers who would tell you, oh no, you know, screw this, and who've kind of given up on this, you might be like, this guy is probably like extremely good at Fortnite or something like that. You know? Right. It's like, oh, see, you're actually still doing it. You still found something where you're like, I'm going to get really fucking good at this. Exactly, right? Yeah. So I think that men generally have this innate drive. And this is also something I've seen, right? In general, I often talk about primal experiences. For men, one of the key primal experiences, primal activities is fighting. And I've just seen over and over again, right? If you get some men and you say, okay, listen, I'm going to teach you some wrestling basics, right? We're just going to grapple here. Most guys kind of light up when you do that.
even guys who are, who come from like the most pacifist, never even was allowed to watch an action movie kind of household, right?
Right.
Who's just never done anything even remotely aggressive. And you're like, okay, listen, wrestle. Most of them are like, oh, wow, this is cool, right?
Yeah.
And I think similarly, this kind of drive to make something of yourself, to build something, to create something in the world is innate. And it's just a question of, can you access it? Can you tap into it?
And like hone it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it basically makes your life better in general. And this is also the almost paradoxical thing about it, right? As long as you're out there going, okay, I'm going to go to the gym so I can get a girlfriend, and I'm going to develop myself so I can get a girlfriend, and I'm going to work on my career so I can get a girlfriend.
Read books so I can get a
girlfriend. I'm going to read books so I get a girlfriend. As long as you're doing that, you're still in that needy mode. You're still kind of unattractive. But it's the moment you discover, oh, I want to do this.
Right.
I want to do this.
When it switches, yeah.
Yeah. That's when it becomes real. Because, I'm saying all this, I just want to be clear, if like most of what I'm saying is based on some evidence, right? I'm not just making shit up. but like if someone came in, I'm not the greatest expert on this, right? If someone came in and says, listen, I have a PhD and whatever, and you're actually wrong, women find all this stuff very unattractive, I'd be like, oh, it's too bad, but I'm going to keep doing it.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not going to, like the things I do, like I wouldn't stop exercising, right?
Yeah,
and I wouldn't stop working on businesses and doing investing and stuff like that. I wouldn't stop any of that. It's like, because I'm doing those things because I want to. It's become an intrinsic motivation. But I do think that, I was very unlucky in my love life when I was younger. So I think I was pushed into some of those stuff because of that, right? I started because I was like, oh, maybe I can get a girlfriend by doing this. But pretty soon it's like, well, I'm just doing it because I want to.
Yeah. As a starting point, it's great, right?
Yeah.
I think we were talking about this in terms of gym, right?
Yeah.
Like or working out rather. If your only motivation is the end result, right? No matter how ripped and shredded you get, you're like, damn it, I still don't have the six pack, right?
Yeah.
But you could look freaking amazing.
Yeah.
But when it switches to, oh, I just enjoy the process of working out. I love lifting heavy things and putting them down. It's so much fun, right? That's just when you enjoy the process for the process itself versus like being outcome dependent, essentially.
Yeah, and ironically, that is when it becomes a really attractive trait. Because then you take the neediness out of it, right?
Yeah.
And you take the people pleasing. It's not like, oh, did you approve of me now? Look, I'm doing the thing. Do you approve of me?
Okay, just as a thought experiment, right? I'm just putting myself in somebody's shoes who's stuck in needy mode right now.
Yeah.
Like personally, just another anecdote, like it took me so long to get to this point where I just do it for the fun of the process, right? So how do we motivate the person who at this moment right now can't see the light at the end of the tunnel?
Yeah. Well, I think you should take any motivation you can get, right? If I need to get a girlfriend is what keeps you going to the gym or something like that, or keeps you studying or whatever it is, then you might as well take it. Because ultimately it's still good for you, right? It's still good for you. It's just that your neediness and that being the source of your motivation might get in the way of the thing you want. Like you're still developing yourself if you're pursuing all these things for just to please someone else, right? You're still developing yourself. Unfortunately, so you get all the personal benefits except the thing that you want.
Right.
Probably.
Yeah.
Because you're too needy. Right?
Yeah.
So unfortunately, but so you should still do it. And see, I think that's also one of those things where you can't there's no way around doing some kind of introspective work here. Because if you have this really strong neediness, and also just if you have a lot of suffering around this, right? So if you aren't just like, well, I'm a bit lonely and it'd be nice to have someone, but if it's like really an obsession, and you might find yourself like, you're constantly thinking about it, but as soon as you're actually standing in front of someone who you could, here's a girl who might be, you could start a conversation or something, you like freeze up, right? You can't do anything. If you're having that kind of experience, I think that indicates that there's some emotional stuff going on.
Right.
There's some, I don't know, emotional baggage, some trauma, something you need to work through. And maybe therapy is usually good for this if you can find
So
a good
good.
therapist. But I also, whenever I talk about therapy, I'm always like, the caveat is not everybody can afford therapy, right? So there's a lot of people who are like, yeah, that would be great, but no. And so, but you don't need to wait in order to afford a therapist. You can start working on this stuff yourself. One of the things you can do, if you haven't done this yet, is you can sign up to the Ikario community for free. And one of the things you can find in there is the shadow workshops, where I walk you through some basic shadow work exercises. And shadow work is basically about confronting your shadow. So in this case, what we're talking about, some fear where it's like, oh my God, a girl could never love me, or something like that. And you confront that and you work with that, and you often discover that there's something else underneath. And you can essentially start working through the pile of emotional issues that's there.
Right.
And I can tell you, look at my experience, you can get incredibly far on your own with this, okay? So shadow work is one of those things, and obviously introspective writing is one that I always talk about. Like, write through your emotional experiences, write through your frustrations, and figure out, again, like, what's underneath this. Figure out what are the stories you're telling yourself. Do you actually believe those stories? You can also basically rewrite those stories, okay? So this is an experience I had a lot with introspective writing, where once I start writing out, what is the story I tell myself here? And it, again, in relation to dating and whatnot, it could be like, oh, I'm so unlovable, I'm a loser, nobody will ever like me, and so on. And then I can look at that and see, this is the story that's repeating in my head. Do I actually believe this? And if I rationally think about it, it's like, hold on, there are people like me who are in a happy relationship. It clearly exists. So if I'm telling myself, oh, my nose is too big, that therefore no woman could ever love me, therefore I'm going to be alone forever. I'd be like, hold on, is that true? Are there any men with big noses who are in a relationship? Turns out, yes.
Yeah.
Right?
Adrian Brody.
Yeah. So, okay. So then you can start unpacking that and be like, actually, this is not true. I must be wrong about this, right? And same for other things. Like, am I totally unlovable because whatever, right? I can think about, is that actually true? Is it impossible, to love someone because you have some flaw that you think is so important, right?
Right.
And you find out, no, actually, maybe it's not that. It's not like that.
And you're the only one who cares about it.
And in many cases, yeah. And so, but this is what I mean by the process of like unpacking the story that you're telling yourself. And I've had this experience where by examining it closely enough, I can no longer believe it, right? Yeah. So even if that thought compulsively comes up again, oh, you're so ugly because of your big nose, it's like, actually, I've thought about this now, and I don't believe it anymore. I'm not a captive of this story anymore, right?
Yeah. The truth is, guys with big noses are sexy. Everybody knows that.
I mean, that's what I discovered later in life, is that if anything, my nose isn't big enough. I'm going to get nose augmentation surgery. Oh, God. That's curious. So anyway.
Yeah. Man, on the visual stuff, like a bit more, we touched on this in terms of social media, right?
Yeah.
But there's also advertising as well, right?
Yeah.
Like the reason... Like, for example, where was I reading about this? I forget now. But when the metrosexual guy was created, that archetype, right, or whatever it's called, it was created to sell cosmetics to guys.
Yeah.
Like, that did not exist before.
Yeah.
So some, freaking section of guys were taken, and whatever insecurity they had was, like, really pinched on hard. And, like, oh, you need the fucking makeup and this and that.
Yeah. And I mean, often advertising works like that anyway, right? You basically take some desire people have,
right,
and you just attach your product to it. This is why you often have ads where it's just like, oh, look at all these happy people, whatever, and they're all like pretty and having a good time. And then it's like Coca-Cola. Like Coca-Cola has anything to do with this, dude. It's fucking sugar water, right? But you just take something that people want. You're like, oh, wouldn't you like your life to be like this? And then you attach your brand to it, which, in most ads, you have attractive people living in beautiful apartments and so on. Even if that has nothing to do with the ad, it's just like, oh, this is the new detergent I'm using. But you're putting it in a context that makes people go, yeah, I want that. I want that to be my life, right? So most advertising is really designed to, poke your insecurities and make these false connections where you think you can consume yourself. You can consume your way to the life you want, which of course you can't, right?
Yeah, you can't. It's true.
Yeah.
But just on the advertising thing. Okay, one story I was telling you earlier today, like whenever I see some nice car, the expectation is like there's gonna be beautiful women all around it, right? But it's always guys, other guys who are like, oh, "How'd you get the car, bro? What can I do?" Right?
Yeah.
But in one place where I think advertising is semi-truthful, has been with Cologne. Like I'm really into Cologne, yeah. And I have found that girls actually notice. They're like, "Oh wow, you smell amazing. What cologne are you wearing?" I'm like, "Hey, they're not lying there."
Okay. Well,
My experience,
this is interesting, right? Because I have never used a cologne in my life, and I basically have virtually no cosmetic products at all. And in fact, it goes so far that I spent more than a year not using any soaps or anything, right? So I would just shower with water. And I have a theory, about this, which is that if you are healthy, then your natural smell is attractive. And what happens is with, colognes and deodorants and so on, it's kind of crazy if you think about it, right? What we do with personal hygiene, where you take these soaps and kind of scrub off your natural oils in your skin and whatnot. You're scrubbing off some of the bacteria that are on your skin that are, that's part of a healthy organism, right? We've got bacteria all inside and around us that are, we are essentially a shared organism, right? And so you scrub all this stuff off, and then you're like, oh, I have dry skin and I smell weird and so on. So now you have to put on lotions and put on stuff to cover up the smell and put on, right?
Right.
And then you have, and then you wash your clothes with stuff that is perfumed. So like the average person, like by the time they walk out the door, there's like 7 different artificial smells on them.
Right.
After they've scrubbed off any
natural sense,
any semblance of what's natural. So to me, that seems like it's not something's wrong there. but again, like my experience with this, just to clarify this a little bit. If you try this out, if you stop showering and like you stop using soaps and deodorants and so on, what you'll probably find is that you start smelling really bad initially. Okay.
Right.
And that's what will push you into using this stuff again. And it takes a few weeks before that settles. And that's basically your microbiome, so your gut flora, your skin flora getting recalibrated, right? Because if you have the right mix of the right bacteria, then you won't have like smelly armpits and things like that. So yeah, and after that you don't stink anymore. Right?
Fair enough.
But so the interesting thing is, in this time when I was doing that, I definitely never had any problem, right? I didn't have any problem with people being like, oh, this guy reeks, And I did get some compliments on how I smell. But I think it also has a lot to do with your diet, for example, right? If you're smoking and drinking and eating processed foods and stuff, you probably won't smell that great.
Right.
So anyway, I just wanted to mention that because I don't have any experience with cologne. I'm sure, I believe you. The olfactory sense is an important sense, and I think plays an important role in attraction.
Right.
But I just wanted to throw in a wrench there to say, like, maybe this is another way.
Fair enough. For me, I think it was, I think you had said this to me a while ago, like, what is the experience of meeting you, right?
Yeah.
So from that point of view, I'm like, okay, in terms of like visually, what senses do I appeal to, so on and so forth, right?
Yeah.
But I've been using cologne forever. I love it. And one reason was because growing up, I was bullied a lot and like in a few racist environments. And one thing that was always used against me is like, oh, Indian people smell. So I'm like, fuck you guys. Like, no one's ever saying that to me again. Like, the only thing I'm hearing is you smell fantastic.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Yeah, and also, I mean, we are like on opposite spectrums in that sense, I think, because I have zero fashion sense and like, all of like this stuff, right? When it comes to like my like grooming and all of this stuff, I'm basically at a zero there. Whereas that's something you pay a lot of attention to.
Yeah.
And I think there's nothing wrong with that. I think that also appearing, fashionable and well-groomed and so on is also you're indicating capability of a sort, because you're saying, I know how to play this game, right?
Right.
And that can be good. But I wanted to mention this, like my approach. I wanted to mention that because and maybe we can end on this, right? Another important factor in this is your frame. And so, like, for example, right, I almost always wear these toe shoes.
Right.
So shoes that have separate toes. And I always wear barefoot shoes, which are never very fashionable looking. So even the shoes that don't have separate toes, but they're made as barefoot shoes, meaning they have a wide toe bed and they're flat and so on. So they don't look very fashionable, right? Because fashionable shoes have a heel and they're pointy and all this kind of stuff, right? But yeah, usually I wear the shoes with separate toes, which are a fashion sin of extreme proportions. And when I wear them to a date, almost always there's some comment or some groaning about how terrible this is, right? But also, I generally don't dress fashionably and stuff, and I don't care. But that's the thing, I don't care.
Right.
And you know, if I show up or whatever, a woman interacts with me, and she will definitely notice, oh, this guy's not fashionable, right? She will definitely notice that.
Right.
But what you will also notice if she interacts with me is that I'm not fazed by it. So you can make a comment about how stupid my shoes look, and I'll be like, I'll probably joke back or whatever. I just don't care.
Yeah.
I'm not going like, oh my God, sorry, I didn't wear my shoes. No. These are mostly I make fun of how stupid your shoes actually look. but say, listen, you're telling me my shoes look weird. One of us is wearing shoes that are shaped like a foot, and one of us isn't. You tell me what's weird, right? But anyway, the thing is that because I don't have a frame of there's something wrong with me, because I'm perfectly comfortable. I know I'm unfashionable. I'm perfectly comfortable with that, right?
Right.
because I know that this is one of my weaknesses, and it's fine. I don't have to be perfect, right? I know I have other qualities.
Right.
So it's like, oh, you're super unfashionable. Yes, you're right. Well observed, right? But because my frame is not apologetic or needy or lacks confidence, what happens is that other people fall into your frame, right? If your frame is strong enough, other people will go, I guess he's right, basically.
It's true. Yeah.
Right? So, but as if you accept that, if someone goes, oh, your shoes are super weird, and you go, oh, yeah, I'm sorry, you know, it's, then they're going, oh, yeah, I'm right, and you're weird. And that's unattractive.
Yeah.
Okay. And this is another thing about attraction, is that often it is irrational, in the sense that if she likes you, she'll be like, oh yeah, you know, he's so quirky, he wears these weird shoes, it's you know, it's kind of cute.
The rationalization.
Yeah. Versus if she doesn't like you, it's like, oh, this guy's the worst, and have you seen his shoes? Oh my God, right?
So weird.
Yeah.
His like toes and everything.
Yeah.
I was freaked out.
Yeah. So it has a lot to do with your frame, and this applies to everything, where and also has a lot to do with how you come across, is basically, well, are you comfortable in yourself, and do you hold your frame, right? Do you hold your frame? Are you basically like, this is what I do, I live by my values, right? Confidence comes essentially from living in line with your values, and oh, you like it or you don't like it, it doesn't matter.
It's fine.
It's up. Yeah, you're free to dislike stuff about me, right? It's everyone's right to do that, but it doesn't faze me. And again, ironically, this makes you attractive, right? This makes you attractive versus if you go, oh, I'll do anything to please you. Oh, you don't like this, I'm going to change it right away. It's like,
I'll be right back.
Yeah, that's super unattractive. So again, we come back to this, where no path leads around real deep self-development. If you want to become attractive, you have to get your shit together. You have to work on yourself, and you can get there. And yeah, to close off with where we started, basically, most of the things that most men worry about are just not that important, right? It is,
optimizing for the wrong metrics.
You're optimizing for the wrong stuff, yeah.
And by the way, the book by Alison Armstrong for women was Understanding Women.
Great. Okay. We'll put all that in the show notes. We'll make sure that these links are available. So yeah, that's covering off some of the topic of how to become an attractive man. To me, this is an interesting topic to talk about, because again, I think I bring a slightly different perspective. My life path here has been very strange, right? But I think that can give me it gives an interesting outside perspective. So this is a topic I would love to hear back from you as well. Like, if you have more questions about this, if you'd like us to go into this some more, I'd love to, right? What you can do is just leave a comment with any questions, any thoughts you have, and we can definitely revisit this topic in the future. In the meantime, go to ikario.com/join, where you can sign up to our community. You can get in for free, and you can access the shadow workshops I mentioned earlier. And that is all. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you, guys.